Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Friday, and that means Friday reads when booktubers talk about the stuff they've read, the stuff they're currently reading, the stuff they're going to read. Whether it's on Friday or it's the weekend or it's Monday, we tend to do these kind of regular stock takings of what we're reading. And mine is going to be a bit of a mess. I'm going to try and thread a narrative string through all of this, but I'm not sure I'm up for it. I'm not sure it's possible. I honestly don't know where to start. I have all sorts of props ready for you. let's start with comics. We start with comics. They don't seem to be connected to anything else. My surly houseboy handed me two comics this time around. One is DC KO #2, and this is a variant cover, absolutely ugly variant cover. But this is a big meaningless punch-up battle story that is not going to be part of any kind of DC continuity. If that wasn't clear in the first issue, it's made abundantly clear in the second issue. And it's by Scott Snyder, and he has a couple of, let's just say, narrative fetishes. And he has literally two of them, and he indulges in both of them in this one issue. But aside from that, it's all of the DC heroes versus all the DC villains, and there is an actual March Mystery Madness bracketed breakdown of who is going to get to the end from the beginning rounds. And this is round 2. And it's fun in a way. Most of the artwork is by the artwork is by Joshua Williamson and Javi Fernandez, and also someone named Zermanico. The artwork is wonderful all throughout. It's hyperkinetic, but it's wonderful all throughout. Really, really enjoyable. It doesn't have the look of so many comics these days that look like they were done poorly on a computer. And there are some good moments for lots of people in this issue that, as you can tell, kind of, sort of, from that cover. The heroes are tasked with finding a whole bunch of DC Comics magical MacGuffins. So we have the Blue Beetle Scarab, the God Killer's Sword, Whirlogog, the Atom's size-changing belt, a Mother Box, Psycho Pirate's Medusa mask, the Hammer of Thor, the Venom compound of Bane that gives him super strength, the Cosmic Rod, the Lasso of Truth, the Soul Taker's Sword, the Claw of Horus, the Genie Pen that allows you to summon forth a genie, a bunch of power rings, and also a Speed Force ring. And they have to just get all of these things and fight each other while they do so. And I was reading that, and it's if you're the 8th grader inside you reads comics, then they're going to be pleased by this, because that's all it is. It's just a fight between the heroes and the villains, and it's done at such a breakneck pace that Scott Snyder clearly wants to just upset your expectations for most of it. Obviously, I mean, he wants to just upset your expectations. I mean, realistically speaking, there is in this round, you can't make it out from these brackets, but they are on a world, and they are looking for 10 items. And one of the people looking for the 10 items is the Flash, Jay Garrick, the original Flash, who could search the whole planet in the time it takes everyone present to blink. He would collect all 10 items immediately, and that would be that. But he doesn't do that. Another person who is part of this is the Justice League member Zatanna, who could simply, she's a sorceress, she could simply order all of those items to present themselves directly to her, and they would obey. She is basically all-powerful. So instead, this is a whole bunch of punch-em-ups. And after a couple of pages of that, I was thinking, well, okay, this is energetically drawn, and I am enjoying the bits and pieces here, but is this all you got? But very pleasingly for me, the bulk of this issue, there is actually a one-on-one fight for the bulk of this issue, which you'd think would defeat the purpose. If you're trying to cram all of DC's heroes fighting all of DC's villains into, 4 issues? It doesn't say on the cover, but I'm pretty sure this is 4 issues. Then you shouldn't have 6, 8 pages devoted to 2 characters fighting each other. But this one did, and the 2 characters were Lex Luthor and Superman. So, although one part of that fight was utterly ridiculous, just Scott Snyder indulging in a fetish, the rest of it was wonderful. It actually boiled down to a philosophical argument between the two of them. Wasn't expecting that at all. I really enjoyed it. So this was, world-cracking, super-powered adventure. And then the other comic that I got was the opposite of that. This is by Gabriel Hardman, with artwork by... Oh no, he did it all. He wrote it and he drew it. This is Arcadia, and it's number 1 of an adventure between 3 wuss heroes. So between 3 of DC's wuss heroes, ones without superpowers at all. There's Green Arrow, who shoots arrows. You shouldn't shoot it like that, of course, but he does shoot arrows. And then the real question, not any of the fake legacy versions of him, but the actual character who wears a featureless mask over his face and has been portrayed recently, since the Justice League International comic at least, the Justice League Unlimited comic, cartoon at least, he's been portrayed as a kind of the Alex Jones of the superhero world. Someone who believes that everything's connected, doesn't believe anything that anyone tells him, is even more of a counterculture figure than Green Arrow. And then Batman, who is portrayed in this, he doesn't have much to do in this issue, but he's portrayed here as kind of the heavyweight of the 3. Although all 3 of these, especially Batman and Green Arrow, have been members of the Justice League. They have been to other worlds. And this is done in very much a noir style. It is a murder mystery and also a conspiracy mystery involving Queen Industries, involving the multi-million-dollar corporation that Oliver Queen inherited and once ran. So technically speaking, aside from a few moments, technically speaking, you wouldn't need any 3 of these to be superheroes. And the fact that they are, not much is made of that in this issue. The question is really the star of this issue, but not much is made out of the fact that they are superheroes. Instead, it's they're sleuthing and they're trying to track down people and they're uncovering a mystery in the jungles. And I was intrigued. I was intrigued enough to follow this to the 2nd issue. Whereas I honestly do think that I am done with DCKO. I think I will trade weight the rest of this. I'll probably want to read how it all turns out, but too much of this was pointless sluggery. The only thing that makes me hesitate about that is that the long confrontation between Superman and Lex Luthor is not something that I predicted. And if there's another one like that in the next issue, I don't know. So anyway, that was comics. Just so that you can easily, and maybe I'll even do one of those timestamp things that real booktubers do, so that those of you who aren't interested in comics, know to jump right to here. Then we can move on to some periodicals. I read a ton of periodicals this week. I read a ton of everything this week. I had such a good reading week. I read like crazy. But we're doing a curated selection. That's not well curated because it's all chaotic. Like, for instance, the TLS. I keep thinking of it as the new TLS because it's newly designed. It's got a new look and feel on the inside. I actually am coming to prefer it. I actually like it a lot. It's much more set up like a literary magazine than like a literary supplement to a newspaper. I am as skeptical as anybody when a venerable institution redesigns itself. It's usually for the worse, but not in this case. And in this issue, they rightly lead with Roy Foster writing about the big new collection of Seamus Heaney's poetry. But, and I'm glad they led with that. There's also a review in here of the new Peter Mathiasson biography, which I have reviewed myself. But Roy Foster, I mean, he's an institution, but it's a very cautious review. I mean, I understand you want the main billing, the top show for the TLS, and I understand that the TLS is certainly going to write about this volume. And I understand that there's not much you can do with it. It's carefully annotated. The volume is carefully annotated and well introduced. So unless a major howler is made in either one of those 2 areas, and one isn't, then what you're left with is the collected poetry of someone that the whole world agrees was one of the last major poets in the world. So you're not going to find any howlers there, right? It is, in one sense, it's a very easy book to appreciate, but a very difficult book to review. And Roy Foster doesn't really review it in a way that makes me. It's totally counterintuitive here. It's why I will never be an editor on the staff of the TLS, much less the guy in charge. But if I had received this volume, I'm sure they received this volume months ago, I would have said, well, we've got to notice it. Critically, we've got to notice it. But we're not going to do this. This is going to be the obvious thing. Two of my editors, at least, are going to suggest, well, of course, we lead off. We've got the foremost Irish expert that we will agree to it, and we'll lead off with it. And I would have said, well, gently, all due respect, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to give it 300 words, 400 words in the back of the issue. We're going to note it and praise it, but we're not going to do anything more than that because there's nothing more than that to be done. I guess the only place left for Roy Foster to go would be to be interesting about Seamus Heaney. And he's only intermittently that for the space they gave him. And how much room did they give him? They start off right away. It goes on for probably 1,000 words. And that is not warranted here. So, but I love the issue. I especially loved, who did they get to do the Peter Mathiasson? Also, these new TLSs take a beating. Better than the old one did. Much better than the old one did. It's higher quality paper. Who did you do? Lance Richardson. James Campbell reviewed True Nature, the Peter Mathiasson thing. And it was a little bit difficult to pin down what he was thinking of it, but I think he had the same impression that I did, which is that it's Mathiasson led a big, larger than life, but the biography itself is a little timid. Really a little timid and also incurious, which is fatal for a biography. If you don't want to know why your subject did all the outlandish things he did, or if you're only passingly interested in that, I found it stronger on the literary stuff than I did on the personal stuff. But that issue, I've got the iPad to help out here, because that issue of the TLS will be our springboard to one of the things that I was poring over all week long. I'm not done with it. I will spend all of December with it. And that is the aforementioned Seamus Heaney, edited by Rosie Lavin and Bernard O'Donoghue. This is a big 1,100-page thing, and it like I said, it is well introduced. It is well curated. The notes are not overly repetitive. They are not incorrect, as far as I can tell. They are not incorrect, which leaves you with you can read that, it's of interest, and then you are left with the poetry, and that's a slow process. I have had to learn that. I've had to relearn that in the last 10 years, especially with the help of BookTube. I've had to relearn that poetry is a slow process. If you already know that you like a poet and you want to really appreciate his work, or even if you don't know that you like a poet, like Auden, for instance, for me 10 years ago, or Larkin now. The way to do a body of work is slowly, to let it seep into you, to feel the difference between the poems that were written strictly for cash or strictly for occasion versus the one that boiled up from raw emotion and was then shaped into verse. So I'm living with this thing, but I will continue to live with it. Then we can move on to my lonely, angry incel BookTube reading event for one, Deadly December, in which I overdose or try to on murder mysteries. And although Deadly December starts in a few days, I have been going at it hammer and tong for the last week. I've got an early start on Deadly December, trying to see how many murder mysteries I can read and reread before I get sick of it and want to turn to bro philosophy, like anyone would. And I reread the first book in 2 series this week. This first one is by Lillian De La Torre, and I reread Sam Johnson, Dr. Sam Detector. Dr. Sam Johnson Detector. And I have a little beaten up mass market of this that I really don't think, the spine is now cracked on it, so I really don't think it's going to survive another read. But this is this is the author having the weird idea to make Samuel Johnson the detective, and faithful James Boswell is there to take it all down, and maybe to do a little bit more than that. Because Johnson is a name, because he's famous, because he was famously more intelligent than anyone else in the world. But the first thing you learn about Johnson is that he was this capacious intellect, maybe more intelligent than anyone in his time period. But the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth thing you learn about him are all reasons why he would make a terrible detective. No matter what you learn about Johnson, you quickly learn about his flaws, his faults, about his mental flaws, about how he wasn't in complete control of his mind, ever. He would have made a terrible detective. He barely noticed anything, ever. So, and this author does account for that. This author does know. I'm nagged by the suspicion that Lillian de la Torre is a pen name, but I'm probably wrong about that. I'm probably remembering something else. But whoever, this author knows how much weight to put on Boswell, who is a champion noticer and rememberer. As you know, if you've read his great book, that's the whole reason why Boswell's Life of Johnson is so great, is because it's so much stuff that even if you spent time around the great subject of your biography, you might not notice. And Boswell does, all the time. And in his own journals, he notices things about himself. It's incredible. But this was not effective at all. I remember liking it the last time I read it, like 20 years ago. I found a copy at a used bookstore that doesn't exist anymore here in Boston, the Boston Book Annex, out from Kenmore Square. Used to walk over the overpass and go over to Boston Book Annex about twice a week. They had a cat. So when I was examining the books on the bottom shelves, I would sit on the floor of the shop. No one was ever in there but me and the owner. And this cat would walk over and just curl up in my lap, doing that horrendous noise that they make. What do you call it? Purring? And I would just have to wait for this satanic beast to move on. But I read this again. I don't think this paperback is going to survive. And I doubt that I'm going to want to read it again. I guess I will try. I'm pretty sure there are other copies. There are other installments in this series. I'll try some of those, but this is one of those examples of a murder mystery that I've liked less the more I've read it. And the same thing is true for the next one, unfortunately. So we had a rocky week for Deadly December before Deadly December even starts. This is James Melville, The Wages of Zen. And this is a murder mystery about a Japanese detective. And I've read, at one point I found a whole bunch of these books in hardcover, and I read them and I thought they were kind of flat. Certainly no drama. Certainly nothing like on the edge of your seat. And this was the same. I will not be going back to this series. It was politely well done. Which I myself don't really want that in my murder mysteries. I know a lot of you do. Politely well done is a perfect description of cozy mysteries, and cozy mysteries are more popular than any other kind of mystery. But it doesn't do it for me. Especially if the main character is the crime solver and not an amateur. Then it doesn't do it for me. So that didn't really work. We're going to keep going here. Okay. This one is something that the folks at Cambridge University Press have, I believe, agreed to send me. This will be here, I think, early next week. They send updates on their packages. Not many publishers do that. I think this is pretty expensive, so I doubt that it will be in your bookstore, and I don't know if it'll be any good. This is by Brian Campbell, and it is The State, the Law, and the People in the Roman Empire, a source book. And the title is a little deceptive. If I remember correctly, this is about Justinian. This is about the law digest of Justinian that he commissioned. He had a whole bunch of people work to codify the laws of his empire. He did a lot of the brushing and polishing of a lot of the prose himself. It was a genuine work. He was not a pasteboard intellect. He was the real deal. So when he did something like this, he was directly involved in it. And I myself think Justinian is famously hard to read, but I've spent a lot of time with him, a lot of time trying to read him. I myself think that Justinian knew, at some level, that his Law Digest would be his claim to fame, that all of history would remember him anyway as a Roman emperor. But I don't think in his heart of hearts, I don't think that he thought his attempts to reconquer the lost territories of Rome with the help of his two great generals would be his claim to fame. I think he really did deep down think it would be this. And I would be willing to bet that he was right. But we'll see. We'll see what kind of detail this goes into. I don't know what to make of that, a source book business. It could be that it's not written to be read. We'll find out. Then we have a book that I got in the mail. I dived into a few of the books that I just recently got in the mail as book tribute. This one is Selina Hastings, The Secret Lives of Somerset Maugham. The key motor here, it turns out, in this book, the trade paperback held up very well. And the key motor here is the idea of Maugham's homosexuality. That it recurs over and over. I'm pretty sure, I'm not really up on the biography history of this figure, but I'm pretty sure that Selina Hastings went into a lot more detail about that than any previous biographer, about his long-standing homosexual relationship, his homosexual dalliances here and there, the long time in the theater and whatnot. I'm pretty sure that if this book covers any ground that's new, it's that. But the thing that I noticed all throughout was not that. It was that Selina Hastings is really sensitive to what Maugham thought about himself as a writer. I just found that fascinating all throughout. I have the copy here. As you can see, I cleaned it up so it doesn't have any of that schmutz on it anymore. And it, like, I marked a whole bunch of places in here. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, every time his lover Gerald was a wastrel, grew more of a wastrel as he was absolutely sure of Maugham's affection and also financial support. And we're told that after dinner there was a rubber or two of bridge over a cigar, following which Gerald would take a group off for some serious gambling. Maugham rarely accompanied them, retiring to bed at 11 in order to be on form for the next morning's work. For Maugham, writing was not just what he did, it was where he lived. I love that line. Just love it. I know exactly what that means. Quote, "I have never been able to persuade myself that anything else mattered," he wrote in the summing up. While at work, he was completely in control of a world of his own making, and in extreme old age he stated that the happiest hours of his life had been spent while seated at his desk when his writing was going well, and, quote, "word followed word till luncheon gong forced me to put an end to the day's work." Because he wrote in the mornings. That line, that for Maugham, writing was not just what he did, it was where he lived. Oh, I just love that. And I loved, I'm not going to hold this up. I'm going to hold this up because we're all technological here. I liked this. I doubt very much that I would ever want to read another biography of Somerset Maugham. But over and over again in the course of this book, Selina Hastings makes great use of the summing up, Maugham's own book on his life. And it occurred to me every time Selina Hastings did that, it occurred to me how long it's been since I've read the summing up. So probably if I leapfrog from this book to anything else, it will be that. So let's see. Let's keep going here. Okay, all right. Then by random chance, the Bean and I were out for a walk. And by random chance, we rounded the corner to a Little Free Library. And I look inside Little Free Libraries when I absolutely shouldn't. I'm up to my eyeballs in books here. But I look in them anyway, and I did. I looked at this one, and I found something that I remembered as a curiosity, but it's been forever since I read either the book or this version of the book. And it's by Ann Patchett, and it's her novel Bel Canto that won her all kinds of acclaim. It is still an absolute staple of book club, book discussion groups of all kinds. Its backlist has legs, as the industry says. And long after she wrote the book, she did this. She did an annotated version of it that is not annotated by an eager student. It's annotated by her. She goes through it and reflects on her own work in the margins. So that is not written in by someone else. That is printed on the page. She reflects on her own work, on whether or not a certain figure of speech works, whether or not it doesn't. She even goes into proofreader type detail about words being repeated or words not particularly effective. And it's absolutely delightful. It's absolutely delightful. I don't know how well. Oh, sorry, we're not going to look at this. We're going to look at this because here we go. I don't know how well this would work for any other author to do it, but what I wouldn't give to see. This is the version of the book that I want. I don't think you could use it as the version of the book because those annotations are so distracting. They're so good, but they're so distracting. But what a treat. What an absolute treat. So the one thing I haven't checked yet, when I finished with this thing, I read it in one gulp because I loved it so much. But the one thing I haven't checked on yet is whether or not I have a print copy, a physical print and paper copy of Bel Canto. I don't know if I do or not. My guess would be no. My fiction collection is smaller than it ever has been. So my guess would be no. But I'll look around and see. Then what else do we got here in this? Okay, there's the Oxford History of the American People. This is another thing that I got in a tribute mail. This is Samuel Eliot Morrison's one-volume history of the United States, and I thought, sure, this thing surprised me. I was not thinking that I was going to read the whole of this, and this thing surprised me too because I was sure that I was going to dip into this in a couple of places and not read the whole thing. And instead I didn't read the whole thing, but I read a lot of it. I read much more of this than I was thinking because the person sent it to me in this wonderful book club edition that is so much smaller than a normal hardcover. It's small and compact. It's much handier than the big hardcover that this thing comes in. If any of you have ever seen this at a yard sale or a thrift shop, the hardcover of this is usually enormous. This is half the size. And I read all the way to the part of the Progressive Era, which Morrison refers to as Theodore Roosevelt, Taft, and Wilson, rather unfairly leaving out McKinley. I think that the American Progressive Era starts with McKinley. But either way, he writes about all these things. Oh my God! Before he gets to that, decades before he gets to the Progressive Era, he's writing about the Spanish War, the Spanish-American War, which I've just read. I read a new book on it, and then I reread the old book on it, and his passages on that are so good. They're so good. They are such an antidote to the woke scolding of the 21st century. And they're clearly meant to be. Some of the elements of that woke scolding were definitely present even when he was writing this book. He firmly argues against the idea that there was any kind of American colonialism involved. Just the opposite, in his opinion. And anyway, he moves on to the Progressive Era. That's as far as I read. So I read that much of the book. And I'll probably read the rest of it. Before I put this on the shelf, I'll probably just read the rest of it, all the way down to Kennedy. But he's writing about the Progressive Era, and he's trying to define its essential characteristics and the legislation that these presidents were pushing through and working towards. And he does in a wonderful way. God, I love the way this author writes. He writes, "The frenzied finance of the 1920s led to the Great Crash and the Great Depression. Another Roosevelt then picked up the progressive torch, calling it the New Deal. And this was then followed by Truman's Fair Deal and Kennedy's New Frontier. All were essentially the same thing, an attempt through government action to curb the arrogance of organized wealth and the wretchedness of poverty amid plenty." To curb the arrogance of organized wealth and the wretchedness of poverty amid plenty. Fantastic. Just fantastic. So glad that I have this. That was tribute well sent. But we're going to move on. We're going to move on to, we're going to go back to the iPad here. Oh, all right. We'll finish up with The Green Knight by Iris Murdoch, which I just talked about on this channel just recently. But actually, I didn't go to The Green Knight on my own. Oh my God, we're going to make a mess of things here. I have an entire wall of book chat, of book criticism, book essays, book prefaces and whatnot, collected in volumes. It's not a commercial aspect of the book trade anymore. No one could do a book like this and expect it to sell, I don't think. I love it, and I find these volumes and have amassed a large number of them, and I spend a lot of time at that wall. I really do. I tell myself that I'm going over to that wall to find out what so-and-so, let's say I've got an author in mind, Sigrid Undset, for instance, and I want to know, okay, well, what do people say about her? Because I don't have a photographic memory for what's in each of these tables of contents. I don't know which book exactly to zing to for everybody. So I think I'll go over to the wall and I will pull down book after book after book, and I will figure out what people thought of her, but which means prowling around the table of contents, going to the indexes and looking at where someone is mentioned. I did that just recently for Camus. I did that just recently for Maugham myself. I went to see if anybody there was writing about him. But I end up staying. I end up just standing there and reading. Or, in a special case, bringing the book back to the fainting couch here and reading just more of it. And I did that with Malcolm Bradbury. This is his book, No, Not Bloomsbury. And it's a collection of his deadline pieces, of his book reviews and bookish essays, and that sort of thing. And he has never really done it for me. I like him just fine, but he is often easy. I get the sense, I was just talking about this with my friend Sam when he was here. You get the sense when you're reading through these books what the writer is doing. And you get a finer sense of what they're doing only if you have done it yourself. Someone coming to one of these books cold is not going to sense the kind of tricks the writer is doing. Was he pressed for time? Was he working with an editor who only wanted bromides and would pay him anyway? Because it's easy to write bromides. So if all you want is the money and you really don't have much time or inclination, maybe you're not all that familiar with the author, then you will write bromides if you know you have an editor who will let you get away with it. Or are you passionate about one aspect of the subject or whatnot? All of that is difficult to describe, but easy to perceive when you're reading these things if you have done this. And I have done this for a long time. So I was reading through his pieces and noticing those elements of it. Like, for instance, he has a piece here called, he retitles it, I think, for this collection, called Busy Burgess, about Anthony Burgess, about, I guess, kind of a thumbnail sketch of his career in progress. Burgess was still alive when he wrote the piece, still working. That's terrible. I mean, it's smart because Malcolm Bradbury was a smart guy, but it's terrible. It doesn't do anything. It just ice skates over the surface of everything. It was especially a shock after reading Aidan Higgins. Just recently I got a collection of the collected book reviews of Aidan Higgins, and he hates Burgess. He hates Burgess. So he goes after him like crazy in like 3 pieces in that collection, especially Earthly Powers, Burgess's greatest book. That's not Malcolm Bradbury. When he's writing about Burgess, he must have been thinking, this editor will let me simply collect a check. So I will do that. And so that's all he does. Whereas he must have been dealing with another editor. I was reading through this. I was just looking for other things when I noticed his long piece on the novels of Iris Murdoch. And I have just read, the piece on Iris Murdoch is like 30 pages long. And it's extremely in-depth. It's extremely knowledgeable and knowing. In other words, it's not just knowledgeable about her career and what her characters are doing, but knowing in the sense of someone who has probably read her novels as they were coming off the press. I don't know that for sure, but it doesn't feel like an assignment. And I had forgotten how good that essay is because the last time I read it, I already had settled opinions on Iris Murdoch and had no intention ever to revisit her work. And then I did. In fact, this year, I finished up rereading all of her fiction in publication order. So I have a lot of thoughts on the subject. So his essay was so much more enjoyable for me. And the same thing, the minute I finished his essay, I wanted to go back to Iris Murdoch's fiction, some of it, without the horrible mental tyranny of a reading project, which is constantly cracking the whip on your back to get all of Iris Murdoch done in 2025. Come on, you're not getting any younger. Instead, I thought, go back and sit with one of her books for a while. And I chose The Green Knight because actually, despite it being really late in her oeuvre, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot more than some of the ones that I am told that I probably ontologically know I should enjoy more, like A Fairly Honorable Defeat or The Sea, the Sea. I know I should like her masterpieces more, and maybe someday I will. The read-through of all of her fiction had the perfect end result. Not only did I find a new major author that I can love, but it left the door open to constantly revisit that author, which is wonderful. Sometimes I do a reading project of somebody or other, and when it's done, I think, okay, great, that's done. And then I'm basically looking in the coffin at an Irish wake saying, he looks good, because I am done. I'm done with the SOB. I've reread all the works. That was my reading project. It's done. I don't ever need to think of you again. But the better result of a reading project is when you finish with it and you very much feel like the writer is still active with you. You will certainly read everything about them that you can get your hands on that comes out new. I am that way with Auden. I'm getting there with Larkin and a couple of other people, and I'm definitely there with Iris Murdoch. So I went back. I pulled the one of you very kindly sent me all of Iris Murdoch's novels in these great old Penguin trade paperbacks. I have them up on a shelf right now that is not accessible. I had to climb on a chair to get to this. I am obnoxious and disliked, so I don't have many people in my life who would mentally cringe if they thought of me climbing on a chair alone here to grab a book. But there's a handful that would. There's also you, my imaginary booktube friends, my Ukrainian sex bots. I imagined when I was doing it, right now, at this moment, 5 people out there are feeling a twinge in their spine, and they're not knowing why, because this fat old Boston bookworm is up on a chair fishing for a book when I have it as an ebook. But I wanted to do honor to this gift one more time for this year, so I pulled this down off the shelf and just read it to read it. Not to knock another notch off my Iris Murdoch project, but just to read it. So it was a third read. I read this when it first came out, then I reread it earlier this year, just a month ago, for my Iris Murdoch project, and then I read it again, and I love it. I love it. It has flaws. She is an awful, digressive, windy author. And I say that as awful when I know perfectly well, she's so good at it, that I know perfectly well. The day may come when those are my favorite parts of her novels. I distinctly remember decades ago, you don't file these things away because you don't know that you're ever going to revisit an author. I distinctly remember a fan of hers years ago responding to me complaining about her at a Chinese place in Boston about those long ruminative digressions. Suddenly her eyes lit up and she said, I know, aren't they great? And I remember coming away from that thinking, what on earth? That is 2 completely different wavelengths for appreciating an author. Now, I still think they try my patience just a bit, but now I see that I could come to love them. Those very kinds of passages. But this book has them, obviously, because it's not a short novel. But let me just read you just a bit. Just a bit here, because these are so good. This is just so good. You don't need to know the context. Just don't worry about the context. Worry about what's being said here, the descriptions. It looked terrible when they took the cast off, said Harvey to Bellamy. It didn't look like human flesh at all. It was all blue and spotty and rotten. I said, it's gangrene. And they said, no. And I thought they didn't like the look of it either. I so much wanted it to be left alone now to breathe the air and the light, like a poor plant that has been in the dark. I wanted the sun to warm it, but they tied it up again immediately, not in a cast, but these very tight elastic bandages. They are even tighter than the cast. It was the following morning. This is the narrator again. Harvey had arrived unannounced at Bellamy's flatlet, having taken a taxi direct from the hospital. Bellamy was touched and pleased that Harvey had come straight to him. He had already given the boy a suitably censored account of his visit to Lucas. The rain had stopped, but London had a drenched, drowned look, the pavements darkened with water, the gutters full of pools. Even the trees looked soaked and dejected. The low, undulating clouds were a blackish gray, and east wind was blowing. Bellamy's one-room flat, now meagerly warmed by the tiny electric fire, was on the ground floor. The window looked out directly onto the street and the noises and presences of the passers-by. There was a very small, sick garden behind the house, scattered with dandelions which survived without actually growing. Bellamy's room contained a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, a table, and a wash basin, and a gas ring. The lavatory was outside on the stairs. In the frenzy of excitement, he had given almost everything away. He had enjoyed this stripping with the joy which is said sailors feel in hurtling things into the sea. He congratulated himself on being able to hate his possessions. His flat was sold. His cottage was for sale. He had hoped to make some acquaintance with his new neighbors, first, of course, the people in the house, and to be able to help them in some way. But except for an acquaintance with the shop lady, he had no success, and had not yet ventured to approach the local clergy. The first floor was occupied by a Pakistani family, a tall, thin father, a beautiful mother with innumerable saris, and 2 boys about age 6 and 8. But except for smiles, they were not very communicative. A silent, shabby, elderly man, rarely visible, was on the floor above. The third floor was an uninhabitable attic where rain poured in through the roof. Bellamy sometimes wondered, what's the matter with me? What do people take me for? What do I look like? Passing boys banged on the window. Harvey had just told him he looked weird. There was no mirror in the room. Bellamy shaved now or less regularly by instinct. He thought, when I'm in there, I'll give up shaving altogether and my face will become invisible. Harvey was reclining on Bellamy's bed, propped up by pillows with both legs stretched out on the counterpane. His crutches were propped up against the wash basin. Bellamy contemplated his fine head of silky blonde hair and his eager, unmarked face. Does it hurt? Of course it hurts. It keeps me awake at night. They gave me sleeping pills, but what do I want with sleeping pills at my age? If only it were just the bone, it's the other things, which are far worse. I'll probably be lame for life. Anyway, let's leave awful doomed me. How are you? You don't look up to much. Are you fasting? that description of post-rainstorm London and the way this all feels so... Actually, the thing that I was looking for, the thing that I noticed in Bradbury's essay, I wanted to know not only, the outline of Iris Murdoch's career, which I know fairly well, but what do you make of the feel of her novels? And more than once in his long essay, Dickens comes up. And I really felt that. I really felt these... It was good. It was good for me. It was very good for me to sit with this novel without worrying about the reading event. Just go back and sit with one of these novels. I really could have picked any of them, but Bradbury seems to like The Green Knight. I mean, he spends a lot of time with the much younger masterpieces, but he seems to like The Green Knight, and it hadn't let me alone. It had nagged at me after I finished it and went on to Jackson's Dilemma. So good for you, Malcolm Bradbury. We're not on the exact same page in many ways, but he will go back up on that shelf, my most used, most consulted shelves, and he did his job. He hooked me. I started reading that, what does he call it? What does he call his long piece on A House Fit for Free Characters, the novels of Iris Murdoch. And yet the next piece in the book is about Muriel Spark, who's a better novelist than Iris Murdoch, and who is, again, given the bromide treatment. So you never know what you're going to get. That's what I mean. A critic who was reviewing this book and had never done any criticism, never worked on a newspaper, never worked for an editor, would say that it's very uneven and that's a mystery. But it is uneven, but it's not a mystery. Not if you've done this. It's not a mystery. It's entirely dependent on what you're allowed to do and what you feel like doing for the editor who's paying, or an editor who's not paying, but who's willing to wait forever, and a million other factors. But anyway, he did what he was supposed to. I pulled this down looking for something else. I saw that. I started to read it thinking I'll just dip in. It hooked me. I put my finger in it before I grabbed this bookmark, but it didn't have a bookmark when it was on the bookcase. And I put my finger in it, walked over to the fainting couch, moved the sleepy bean, sat down, read the whole piece, and then immediately wanted to go spelunking, go mountain climbing, and get this, which is exactly the kind of organic chaos that fills this whole Friday Reads for me, because it was just ping-ponging from one thing to another. Because you'll notice something that's almost completely absent from this Friday Reads. New releases are almost completely absent here. And if I were to do a Friday Reads next week, I would be willing to bet they would be completely absent. I am not reading 2026 books. And 2025, for me, is is close to being over. So that is true. That is absolutely true. That is an accurate assessment. There are very few new books here. But anyway, that is my Friday reads. That was 45 minutes of I don't know what. Sorry. But it was kind of organic. My reading was bouncing all over the place, and I want to know about yours. That's the thing. That's the unspoken second shoe of all Friday reads or weekend reads or Monday reads is, what about you? How's your own progress going? What are you reading? We're on the cusp of a new month. Are you making a new TBR for December? Do you do that month by month? If not, why not? Are you carrying over old projects? I want to hear all about it. Did you have a good reading week? I had an excellent reading week, not only numerically, but also in terms of how much fun I had. So I'm hoping for the same thing this upcoming week. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.